Oh my gosh.
There we go.
It excites me every time I hear that bell. Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
Hey, what's up, dude?
Oh, right. Is there anything on your mind before I delve into my topic?
Oh, I want to start off with a real fun topic just
Yeah, let's
because
do it.
this is one that's been in the news a little
Hmm.
bit. And I know we don't often cover celebrity culture, but you know, I don't know if you saw, but Britney Spears now has control of her Instagram again. And the
Oh,
first thing
all
she did
right.
was post a topless selfie. Of
All right.
course, she's, got herself covered up. And I have to say that this is one of those things where like I don't understand how people are kind of diving into this because
Mm,
you hear a lot of people yelling free Britney, but then the moment that, she posts a topless selfie of herself, on the Instagram that she controls, they're like, ooh, maybe her mental health. And it's like,
yeah.
once you think back to 1997 through 2000 and the outfits that Britney was wearing, like people profited off of the fact that she was a sex symbol. So
Right.
why is it an issue now at like 40 that she's posting topless selfies of herself? It's like, was she mentally unstable then?
Mm. They just want to
It,
judge somebody. They want somebody to judge. So that's why they wanted
absolutely.
her back?
Absolutely. And so it's just like, it feels really icky to me because it's like you sit there and a bunch of people yell free Britney.
Hmm.
She posts a topless selfie and then everybody's like, ooh, mental health. And it's like, what if this is like, the most freeing thing that she's gotten to do in 13 years? You know,
Yeah.
like, what if being proud of her body is part of her mental health? You think about it, she's got two kids. She's definitely not the 20-year-old sex symbol she once was.
Mm-mm.
What's the matter with someone being proud of their body at 40 years old? I mean, I'm 35. I'm not exactly as proud of my body, but
I think it's a beautiful thing. When people are happy and content with themselves, it's a beautiful thing. And whatever that journey takes, it's like watching a cake being baked. You can't judge the cake until it's finished, and Brittany's still in the process. The one thing that really made me question whether she should get her freedom was this comment she made where she said, I didn't even know that I could get this eliminated or canceled. And I thought to myself, if you're just sitting at home, like with nothing but Google, and wouldn't you be looking this up if it's what you wanted? And it kind of bugged me that she was like the Simpsons reference. I tried nothing and I'm all out of options. You know what I mean?
well, I mean, you also have to remember too, like this isn't just like your normal, like, hey, I've got a problem, so I think I'm just going to Google this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
conservatorships and some of these legal confines are really difficult to get out of. And in order to navigate it, you really do need a lawyer. And when you can't get your own lawyer to do that because you're under
For
conservatorship,
sure, for
like
sure.
as as much as I, that was one of those things, like that was my initial reaction to it. I was like, well, I mean, you've got all this, and then I'm like, wait, step back, you've worked in law,
Yeah,
you know how difficult this can be.
right.
So
And
let's think about this and
and who knows
realize.
what if she Googled, can I do this? If it came up doubtful, and she was just
Right.
like, oh crap. Yeah, so I mean, I got past that. I think everybody deserves their freedoms if they're not hurting other people. And she
Mhm.
seems like a genuinely compassionate mother. You know what I mean? And I think she's a beautiful soul. So I'm happy, but I don't
Right.
also have all the information, and it's a sliding scale. My opinion means shit because I have almost no information personally about her day-to-day life.
Right. And that's one of those things, like I think, we can all agree that everybody should have, their individual freedoms to pursue what it is that they want. And,
Yeah.
perhaps there was a really good reason for Brittany to be under conservatorship 13 years ago, but that
Mhm.
reason doesn't exist now. And the reality of getting this conservatorship revoked got harder as the years went on. So, I
For
mean,
sure.
that's one of those things, like navigating the legal realm is
Mhm.
difficult on a good day. But now
Right.
imagine that you've had your rights revoked almost. Like you
Right.
don't have the right to go get your own attorney. You don't have a right to spend your own money. You don't have a right to
Hmm.
question what it is that you're under at that moment. Like that's a bad deal, like for
Right.
anybody.
And to imagine that she started before that episode with you have no right to privacy and you have no right to respect, and where the paparazzi were literally pushing her to go crazy so they could get pictures of her going crazy, you know, and then that
Right.
kind of just drove her crazy. It would drive anybody crazy, and
Right.
it kind of drove her crazy, but she sought mental health, right? And she slowly overcame it because that's how processes work. When you have PTSD, it doesn't go away in an instant. It takes just as long to get rid of it as it does to create it. And so
Hmm.
she might be back, but she might still need continuing therapy and more topless shots, please, Brittany.
I mean, I think it's important to empower a person, and
Hmm.
if this is what Brittany needs to feel empowered, then I think that's something that most individuals should support.
Yeah.
It's this world is hard enough as it is, but
Hmm.
like the fact of the matter is that people are judging this whole scenario in a weird way,
Yeah.
and it's definitely something that everybody's got to think about. It's like the freedoms that you have and the freedoms that another person have are often very different, and remind you that this is somebody who hasn't even gone through a criminal system trying to
Right.
get their rights back. This is
Right.
somebody who had their rights revoked because of mental health issues. So I mean, to understand that it's just as difficult for
Hmm.
somebody who hasn't gone through the criminal justice system as it is for somebody who has, I mean, that should tell you a lot as it is.
Yeah. And I think that's why I don't cover celebrities because they have such a microscopic spotlight on them. And I remember like when Demi Moore cut her hair or Rose McGowan shaved her head or all these women just reacted to that spotlight because it seems like we put such a spotlight on these women. And then I've been watching the Rowan Farrow documentary on Harvey Weinstein, Catch and
Hmm.
Capture. Catch and Kill. And to think about while they're in our spotlight, they're getting pressured like Harvey Weinstein all the time. And
Yep.
that, I mean, and then we judge them for that. It's just so crazy. We put them on a hot plate and then get mad when they dance. And it's so I try not to do that. But I do
Hmm.
always want to talk to celebrities, but not because of their celebrity. I want to know what they go through just as the same I want to know what Jeffrey's going through, you know?
Right. And that's just it. Is like they're people too. Yes, they live
Mm-hmm.
a much different lifestyle than any of the rest of us could probably ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always going to be different for everybody. It's not going to be the same for a Ben Affleck, or a Matt Damon or a
Right.
Brad Pitt as it is for a Britney Spears or a Rose McGowan. And
Right.
and the fact of the matter is too is that even if they are having mental health issues, why is that so bad? Like the whole point is to destigmatize mental health issues to encourage
Mhm.
people to be able to get help.
Right.
And if you're still going to use mental health issues against a person, then clearly you're not on that board yet. You're not on that playing field of it's like, okay, this person obviously needs some help.
Mhm.
Let's not try and make this worse.
Well, even we could make it so much easier by just removing that microscopic spotlight and just realizing that maybe 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, that celebrity's on, but when they're off, like when they have the off sign on their head, we need to just leave them alone and let them go to the grocery store, let them go to the
Have
bathroom.
dinner. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, I think to myself, what if we reversed the polarities and thought to ourselves, how did Tom Hanks get so many roles? Right? Like, how did Matt Damon get those roles? Like, what if we thought about them the way we think about women? Like, oh, of course, Gwen Gwyneth Paltrow, she got her roles because she slept with Harvey Weinstein, but who did these male celebrities sleep with? Did they sleep with Harvey? You know what I mean? Why were they cast? And it's disgusting. And so you
Hmm.
realize if it's disgusting to think that way, then it's disgusting to think the other way. But we could
Should
cure
be.
all of that by just putting more transparency into the system. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Getting rid of these NDAs and payoffs. You know, I just think that NDAs might be fine for civil, but not for anything criminal. I think
Oh, absolutely not. No.
any criminal act should null and void any NDA, and that should be in the fine print of every
S-
NDA.
Well, so being a contracts person, NDAs do
Mhm.
not NDAs are not acceptable for criminal stuff. It's just that there's a very fine line that you can skirt with some of it.
Okay.
So it basically it's like if lawyers aren't involved in
Right.
like some type of a settlement and
Mhm.
non-disclosure agreement, yeah, it's a very very tight rope to walk, and I could go into that in depth, but
So this girl, she recorded Harvey Weinstein, right? And
mhm,
then they settled, and so she had to give all of her electronics to, Harvey's company so they could go through and scrub them. But what she did was she sent that recording to like 50 emails and then went back to Italy and found one. But she couldn't share it. The NDA said she couldn't share it, so she played it, and Rowan Farrow recorded her playing of it, and that's how they got the recording, and they got to like, so yeah, it's a fine line with these NDAs, but I'm really happy the women came and spoke out, because
mhm.
man, that is just a disgusting incident in our life, and I hate that. I think that somebody spent like 17, 18, 19 years raising a daughter and a good kid and going through those trials and tribulations, and then Harvey comes along and goes, fuck you, you know and it's just disgusting that you would do that to somebody's child.
Yeah, it's a royal mess
Hmm.
there. It's ugh, like
Yeah. I'm so glad he didn't get pardoned by Trump. You know what I mean? When you think of the pardons that could have happened.
well, and that's where people have to realize like what the president can pardon is only related to federal stuff. You can't pardon state
Right.
crimes, and
Yeah.
and most and in terms of sexual assault, most of it tends to be state crimes. The only way that it turns federal is if it goes interstate. So
Right.
your Jeffrey Epstein's, for
Mm,
example.
I love that. Good. Good.
So
Good. 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 I like that.
So what do you got for topics? That was a fun little intro.
It was, and I like staying on that. I think we should respect people more. I had a whole bunch of topics, and we could skirt through them real fast. I have an overarching thing. There's something that's bugging me that's right up your alley, and
Mm,
the COVID really exposed it. But I've
hmm
been trying to spend all week trying to figure out how to explain this in a way to
hmm
where people will get it, because it's a great off ramp for everybody here. And I'm going to try and explain it, and then you'll flesh it out because I know you understand me better than most. So, like, the Delta variant here is pretty much affecting, we're going to say, conservatives, Republicans, people on that side of the line, right? And
hmm
I I think if you took that, this infection analogy, and put it into media terms, okay? So where the United States is a very specific ecosystem of media. And then what happened was the Russians came in and put Asian carp in our ecosystem. And we weren't used to that form of communication and misinformation, and it kind of fucked us all up. And then
hmm
half of us got inoculated and went, that's crazy. I'm not believing that. But the other half were like, oh, we're infected, right? And then I'm going to relate it to the Friday topic, was this Tom Barrack spy thing, because it's underreported that the UAE, United Emirates, right? United Arab Emirates, actually offered to do the same thing with the Trump campaign, with misinformation campaigns. And we don't know if they actually did that. So now what I'm thinking is our ecosystem, I don't think people understand, and we covered this a while ago, how fragile our media ecosystem is. We have the right to say anything, so we don't need to lie. We can say the truth and see if we get support. But all of a sudden, people came in and said, what if we lied? And we believed that our media system would flesh that out and get rid of it, right? Because that's not normal, but it's stuck. And
hmm
so, am I explaining this right? Does this make sense?
I think I know where you're going with it. Um, so basically, you ended up with two camps: people who are going, no, 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 this is the truth, and people
Mhm.
who went, well, it's my choice to believe a lie, and
Which is
and
an
we have
American thing. But
and
they
and,
don't.
and be able to
They're not
tell it.
calling it lies, though. They're not calling it lies. They're
No,
just saying, "I
they
believe
called
it."
it alternative facts is what they called
Right.
it.
Right.
And I mean, that's just it. Is you can call it alternative, whatever the fuck you want, but there's facts, and then there's misinformation, disinformation, and that's really
Right.
what it was. I mean, Trump even said it himself in a recent interview where somebody asked him if why he was lying. He's like, he didn't like the word lying. He said, I believe he said it was, there's another word for it, and it's more beautiful, disinformation. And I'm like, you know what disinformation is? It's lying.
Yeah.
Disinformation is literal, actually telling false narratives in order to deceive. Like, that's
Right.
what disinformation is. Misinformation, like we've talked about before, is like you hear something and then you try to tell somebody else and then you accidentally get it wrong. Misinformation
Hmm.
happens. The simplest concept is you hear somebody's phone number and you accidentally swap 2 digits. That's
Right.
misinformation. Disinformation is when you're like, like, oh yeah, here, let me give you my number, and then you give them you give your number as the national rejection hotline.
Right.
As a more comical idea. But so basically what has happened is that they've willingly allowed disinformation into the narrative and propagated it. Great example of this is the fact that, was it not even a month ago, was CPAC, I want to say. And they celebrated the fact that Joe Biden missed the 70% vaccination mark. They
Yeah.
were literally cheering at people not getting vaccinated.
Right. Because it was a war against Joe Biden and not for their supporters. It was a war against Joe. Let's make Joe look bad by dying.
So basically a bunch of people who are going to vote Republican are dying and they're applauding their own deaths. Like, what
Right.
the fuck?
That was my whole question. You're killing the voters that would vote for you. The ones that you're not killing, you're telling that the election is rigged, don't vote. And then you're suppressing anybody that could be possibly left. Who's going to vote Republican? And I think Republicans are starting to get that message in small pockets because they're coming out in wild varieties of terms in
Hmm.
from trust the science to I don't know why you're not getting vaccinated, you're dolts. You know what I mean? Like, you know why they're not getting vaccinated. You told them not to get vaccinated.
Right. And so now you've got like the Alabama governor, Governor
Right.
Ivey, sitting there
Hmm.
saying it's time to blame unvaccinated people because they're
Right.
letting us down for this. And it's like, we've been saying this for a while. It's like, look,
Hmm.
on the left you had the group of people that are like, vaccines are going to be what cures this disease. No, it's not. I mean, the
Right.
reality is that this is, COVID's going to end up being like a seasonal flu.
Hmm. But you know
It's
what's funny is that when Governor Ivey said that, and I saw that on the news, immediately after a Democrat said, well, she shouldn't be calling them dolts. Many of them are just black people that are scared of the vaccine. And it's like you just pivoted the story so you could complain, right? The
Yep.
whole time you've been saying conservatives, conservatives, and now the conservatives are like, oh yeah, it's us. Shit, we'll fix it. And we're like, nope, it's the black people now. Like,
And it's like
you can't hold Jello, Jeffrey.
one of the things that we have to keep in mind is the fact that, when we look at who the unvaccinated population is, it's not just Republican adults that are not vaccinated. We have
Right.
the population 12 and under that aren't vaccinated yet. We have the
Hmm.
population under 18 that their parents have to consent to them getting vaccinated. You There's also people that literally are physically unable to just go get the vaccine. That is
Yep.
part of it. I mean, like, we have to differentiate the group of people who are willingly choosing to not get vaccinated, because that, I mean, granted, overwhelmingly it's going to look Republican. It's
Hmm.
going to be a lot of other people as well. It's going to be liberals that, are sitting there, saying that they should have the, a robust, natural, healthy immune system. Okay, best of luck on that one. You'll
Right.
have people who are just nervous about getting it and they're not willing to go talk to anybody about it.
Or the
Like,
people that are like, I'm not going to put a Trump vaccine in my arm. Remember that?
oh yeah, no,
we,
exactly.
we were all just shamed into taking a Trump vaccine, which I happily took. I would have taken that if Hitler had said, here's the cure to COVID.
Like that's the craziest part is then you've got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene who's sitting there saying that vaccination is brown shirt efforts. I'm like, yeah, because people have been, only a select group of people are being murdered here.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there is, but it's by their own party's disinformation, quite
Right.
literally. Like, this is one of those things. It's like you literally have told your people not to get the vaccine. You've sat there and you've spread all of this fake bullshit around.
Right.
And now that it's only in your areas really that people are seeing hospitals fill up and overflow, now
Right.
you're suddenly like, oh my god, this is terrible, people need to get vaccinated, why aren't people getting vaccinated? Meanwhile, all I have to do is look like two breaths ago when you're sitting there spouting vaccine misinformation and
Mhm.
disinformation and conspiracy theories and all this other crazy bullshit.
Right. Ron DeSantis is like split from Trump on this issue now. He's like, get vaccinated because Texas, what is it? Texas, Florida, and Missouri account for 40% of the cases.
Arkansas, I think it's Arkansas, Mississippi, Florida, and Texas.
Yeah, make up 40%. Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
Arkansas and Mississippi have a 36% vaccination rate in their states. 36%. Washington just hit 70% at 16 and older.
Right. And so when I told people Republicans are going to come for the immigrants so that they can get to the black people, to come for the poor people. Right now, what you're seeing is them getting rid of poor people by just saying, don't get vaccinated. And then the poorest people, the less educated, believe it and they die. You know,
Hmm.
it, I've always said, except for abortion, they are a pro-death. They don't care. Once you come out, they want you to die. But for some
Pretty
reason, they
much.
make money off of baby births. You know what I mean? But after that, no, they don't care about you. I believe they're climate deniers because it'll affect the brown countries first, and they'll burn
Hmm.
off all the brown people. And then they're like, no, don't come here, stay there. We caused it, but we caused your country to burn. But, hey, so.
It's just absolutely wild because
Hmm.
there, you know, uh, like we talked about, like there's a vast difference between vaccine hesitancy and being an anti-vaxxer. And
Yeah,
I know plenty of people that are still vaccine hesitant, and I tell them is like, if you want to understand like what the decision looks like in terms of whether or not we accept a vaccine, all I have to do is point to AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca is one that we were going to use in the country, but because
right.
there were so many deaths associated with with that vaccine,
Hmm.
we flat out said it is not safe. Europe,
Right.
on the other hand, has decided that it is safe. And I can't understand why they said that. Like, I really don't. Usually they have much stricter standards than we do.
Right. Johnson and Johnson had 6 cases of blood clots in a certain age range of women, and we caught it that fast because of the data, and we got a warning on the Johnson and Johnson because of that. That fast. That
Yep.
fast.
And so, like, the reality is that does Johnson, yeah, and they've started to tack warning labels onto Johnson and Johnson.
Right.
So one of the things that we have to look at is what they're doing. They haven't tacked anything on that like that with Pfizer and Moderna. There are things that they're monitoring, yes, but these are things that seem to resolve themselves pretty quickly for the
Right.
most part.
Right. As
Um,
opposed to long hauler COVID syndrome, which I want to remind everybody does exist.
Absolutely. So it's one of those things like I don't know what to tell people in terms of
Mm,
you know, whether or not you think that these vaccines are going to be approved. I can tell you what it looks like when we say no, and it looks like what we did with AstraZeneca. And at
right.
this point, if you think that the two-shot regimens are not going to be approved, at this point the answer is no. They're going to be approved. And if you really want to wait for the FDA to approve it, here's going to be
Yeah.
my question. Are you still going to have the same hesitancies once the FDA approves it? Because I guarantee you they will.
Right.
The problem here is that whether you're going to sit down and say, oh well, it was Biden's FDA approved it, so I'm not going to get it.
Exactly.
And that's like, okay, well, it's still a vaccine that was created and sped up under Trump. I don't know what to tell
Right.
you other than that. Like,
There's a point where you don't know what to say. And that's why I wanted to bring this media thing up because it gives everybody an off ramp. So if you imagine like Russian media attacks on us as a virus and Donald Trump kind of patient zero in that, I mean,
mm-hmm,
you have to understand that like the people he surrounded himself with were Michael Flynn, who was working for Turkey, and this Tom Barrack, who was working for the United Emirates, and um, Papadopoulos, and Manafort, who were working for the Russians. It's like he had a coalition of misinformation around him, and then it enveloped the U.S. And
mm-hmm,
it's like it's like Donald Trump divided us like a bad relationship. He said,
mm-hmm,
"Don't listen to your wife, who's smart. Listen to me, your friend." And like Republicans got divorced from the United States and said, "We're going with this guy." And it was just so weird. But it's like part of the country got infected with misinformation. It's not their fault. Everybody got infected, but you can come back. Like there's a cure for it, right? The truth, just the truth.
mm-hmm,
And I don't know how to get back to the truth. And like we always said, go back to listen to our misinformation episodes to try and find truth. But we need to get back to truth. And if you need to simplify it and work up from there, like,
mm-hmm,
yes, there is air. We breathe air, right? We can all
right,
believe in that. Water is wet. Yes, yes, we can believe that. Like the sun is
right.
hot. We
So
can
like,
start there, right? And work our way up.
absolutely. And part of that needs to be that, there's information out there that is being gathered that we're still working on.
Hmm.
Some of the information that I was reading up on and studying yesterday was just like the breakthrough cases with COVID, for example.
Ooh,
So here,
Israel is in the news.
so not just Israel, but even here in Washington State, because it's like what everybody's doing is going to be different in terms of how they approach it. Israel
Right,
had a great vaccine push until they had a bunch of governmental issues, and then their vaccine process halted
right,
because of lack of payment. Here in the US, that's a different story. So like
right.
even for like for Washington State, for example, yesterday, among our numbers, so there have been 3,446 breakthrough cases.
Mm.
That represents 0.7% of all COVID cases that we've had in the state.
Wow, zero point 0.7. That's a lot actually.
Point 0.7% of all COVID cases. That's a
In
lot,
in
but
the state, in the state.
in the state. But when you
Okay.
think about it, the idea that the vaccine is quote unquote, at this point, you would say 99.3% effective.
Okay. And
That's
the,
pretty damn good.
those numbers include people with immune diseases, that includes the elderly with underlying conditions, because that's the same thing as in Israel. They had a 38% effective rate when it came to including everybody. That included,
So that's
people
a
that were going to get.
38% effective rate in preventing you from getting the disease altogether. In
Right.
Washington State, I think it's 34% is what I was reading yesterday.
But that
Um,
includes everybody, including seniors and the immune
mhm.
compromised, like everybody. Like, but that, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I think you're about to make a point that I was going
Um, and then when you look at the deaths, we've had of those breakthrough cases, there have been 48 deaths associated with it. So when you look at it in terms of the deaths, it represents 0.7% of all deaths in this from COVID in the state. So like this is one of those things where it's like if you're wondering whether or not vaccines work, the answer is yes.
hmm.
They work very well. It's just a matter of learning the numbers and understanding it.
Right.
No vaccine is 100% effective. There is no vaccine out there that is going to be 100% effective. And that's something that people are going to have to come to terms with. The left, especially, is going to have to come to terms with that fact. Because,
Hmm.
you know, right now you're seeing the Delta variant is now 83% of all cases in the United States, and people are
Right.
panicking.
It is a monster.
And people who are vaccinated are getting the Delta variant, yes.
Right.
But at the same time too, like it still is in the range of what we would expect any of our other vaccines to work with.
Hmm.
So reality is that people who've had COVID have antibodies. I think we brought this up last week, where 9 months after people have had COVID, 98.2% of people still have antibodies 9 months after they've had COVID.
Right.
So there's still some immunity there. Vaccines obviously are right about the same, but there's still a much more, there's a much higher and more concentrated antibody test, not antibody test, result that we're finding. It's more predictable what
Right.
your immunoresponse is going to be. The reality is that COVID's not going away, and anybody who thought
Mm-mm.
that this was going to go away at this point, I really wish that were the case. And that's going to be another thing for medical science to figure out, is how do we vaccinate people so that way you don't get viruses at all, period.
Right.
That's another step. But
Right.
the fact of the matter is that in very little time we've created a vaccine that is fast to produce, number one.
Right.
Number two, highly effective compared to most other vaccines that we give people.
Mm-hmm.
And number three, like, its manufacturing methods is actually pretty cheap too. Like,
Yeah.
reality is that there's a lot of diseases out there that we're going to be able to fight for a change.
Yeah.
And
By copy and pasting new,
quite literally,
you know what I mean? And I think that's so cool. So what you're saying is people that believe in vaccines are talking about 98.3% of the cases. That's their proof. And anti-vaxxers are talking about 0.7% of the truth, right? Like
yes,
anti-vaxxers are saying this happened to this person when you could trace that back to an autoimmune deficiency or an
potentially, yeah.
immunity disorder. So what they're saying, they're spotlighting 0.7% and pretending it's more than it is. And the 98.3% are saying we believe it's safe.
99.3%.
99.3% are saying, we're going based on this. And anti-vaxxers are saying, yeah, but what about this? And I had that same argument with my friend in Sweden. He said, I'm not going to give my kid a vaccine because there's a 0.7% chance it could kill him. And I said, yes, but you can test him for that, right? Like, wouldn't you
Right.
go and just do the further test to find out if you are immune compromised or it could kill you? There's tests for that, you know?
And the reality is that when it comes to vaccination programs, like, I have a friend back in Montana, and this is where this gets really unfortunate, and this is something that we do need to highlight. So currently they have to undergo testing twice a week in order to do their job. They are also one of the people that they have severe reactions to vaccines. And because they can't get the vaccine, their workplace is requiring to do these expensive tests out of their own pocket
Hmm.
every week, twice a week. And this is where I have to tell people on the left, look, the whole point of us getting vaccinated is so that way when people who have these immuno issues can't get vaccinated, they can rely on us to do that heavy lift.
Right.
Like, this is that part of the science that you're choosing to ignore. Not everybody can get the vaccine. You've said it in the past before, and you have to accept the fact that there are going to be people out there that are conservative that actually can't get the vaccine. It's not that they don't want to, it's
Mhm.
that the last time they got a vaccine, it damn near killed them.
Right. I have a friend like that. Hi, Tammy. And she says the same thing. Last time she got vaccinated, she had a bad reaction and was in the hospital.
12
And so
years 12
I
years later,
understand.
she's still $40,000 in debt
Wow.
because of a vaccine. And it's like we have to learn how to separate the politics from the person, and the person cannot be vaccinated. The politics are just a shitty side effect at times.
Yeah.
And so regardless of the politics, like, this person can't be vaccinated, it is incumbent upon those of us who can to be vaccinated for those people's protection. It's the best we can do, because we can't guarantee that even those of us who are vaccinated aren't going to get the disease, but we can definitely reduce the chance that we're going to get it and then spread it on to somebody else through vaccination. That's how it works. That's literally the entire process. It was that process before the mRNA vaccines came around. It's
Yep.
the same process now. It's not going to change anything. That's how the system works. That's how herd immunity works
Hmm.
in the scientific era.
And we don't know the exact number of herd immunity. You know, it's like when it happens, it'll happen, but don't push for a specific number. Just get everything you can. But I want to say it again, what I said last week. If you're going to listen to a politician and take advice from a politician about COVID, you're going to get political advice. If you talk to your doctor about a medical condition, he's going to give you medical advice. If you talk to your Aunt Sally about COVID, she's going to give you Aunt Sally advice. Get advice from the person that's going to give you the correct advice. And that is rarely a politician, I
Right.
think.
Exactly. Like, stop relying on politicians to give you advice. Like there's only, like, even for me, like, I'm a numbers person. Like, all I can talk to you about is statistics. That's what my education is in at a
Right.
master's level.
That's rational.
I am educated in numbers. I know how to read this stuff. It's like, does that mean that my interpretation of the numbers is the end all be all? Absolutely not. It's like, I can just tell you what it looks like. Medically speaking, you need to go talk to your doctor
Yeah.
about whether or not this is worth it for you. Because if you're the kind of person who has immuno issues and getting a vaccine damn near kills you, I don't want you getting the vaccine. Absolutely not.
Right. And I want to know that you can be safe. I'll wear a mask around you if I have to, even though I've been vaccinated, because I can be asymptomatic. And it just prevents me from going to the hospital, but not from contracting it and getting minor illnesses from it.
Absolutely. And so, like, this is where that whole, like, individual freedom and responsibility to your community have to overlap. Like, yes, it is
Hmm.
my individual freedom to choose to be vaccinated or not. I chose to be vaccinated because I'm still responsible to my community, and my actions don't just affect me. The
Right.
idea that you can swing your fist as much as you want until it lands on the other person's nose, well, that includes coughing too, you know?
Yep.
And especially for, and especially for the people who can't be vaccinated. Like, at some point, this is going to be a much different story. And when we have enough people vaccinated, I do imagine that this is not going to be as much of an issue. I imagine that there's probably going to be two more boosters by the time 2022 hits.
I hope so.
We've already got one in the works, and I guarantee you, whatever the next variant is after Delta that they're concerned about is going to be the one they work on next.
Sure. But they're also predicting ahead and researching the whole virus so that they can come to a conclusion. I
So
want
that
to
way
say
they
one
can just
thing.
tool it. Yeah.
Rights come with responsibility.
Hmm.
Okay. You know what I mean? I heard a journalist say that. I believe in the First Amendment. I can say everything, but as a journalist, I have a certain responsibility to not, take advantage of that. And yes, you have the right to not get vaccinated. You don't have the right to infect other people, though. Like, that's not right. That doesn't make sense. So mask up or get vaccinated, but know that you are carrying it. There's a good chance at this point, if you're not vaccinated, you are sick because it's that rampant. It's that dense,
Hmm.
you know somebody that's sick. If you're not vaccinated, you know somebody that's not vaccinated and sick. And what really disgusts me is that people are shaming other people into not getting vaccinated. Like, you should not infringe on people's freedoms that way. And there is discrete vaccinations. Look into your state, and I'm
Hmm.
I'm guaranteeing you will find a discrete location to get the vaccine.
I believe even in Washington, there's for 13 and up, there's medical discretion for the teenagers who want to do
Yeah.
things. There's been a few anecdotal stories of kids who've gotten vaccinated because their parents are anti-vaxxers and they would
Hmm.
rather get vaccinated, and or there's any number of health things that they have done, but they
Right.
have the medical discretion to do because of the way that, like, I think that's fantastic. I think 13 is a pretty good cutoff number for that because, well, I mean, at 13, I definitely understood a few things better than some of
A
my.
9-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is that, like, I can make the argument for and against at 13 to 18, but it's one of those things where sometimes you just get stuck with parents that are batshit crazy,
Yep.
and you still have to be able to make some decisions for yourself. I mean, as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, I made a lot of decisions for myself.
Me too. A lot of bad ones too.
Oh, a lot of terrible fucking decisions. Some of them that I'm still finding out about. But
But isn't that the time to make those mistakes before you become an adult and you're responsible for them? You know what I
well,
mean?
the other thing too is that that was also a time when some of the decisions that I made didn't have any sort of adult advice given before I made the decision.
Right.
Whereas when it comes to medical decisions, there is a person with a education and an experience level that's going to be able to provide you the best advice. It's not like some kids like, yeah, I'm going to go off and get vaccinated, BRB. You know, the
Right.
doctors and nurses are still educating these kids, hey, this is what could happen, this is what you're going to see, this is why we're doing this.
Mhm.
It's not like you're meeting some rando adult in the back being like, hey, you got some of that vaccine for me.
Right.
I
It's
mean, at
not a
this
coat
point I'd be
hanger in
telling
a
people to
back
do.
alley, right?
No, seriously. Like you're working with medical professionals in order to get the best results for the person. And
Right.
even at 13, I would still expect a doctor to be like, "Hey, what do you know about your medical history? Do you know if you've had any allergic reactions to anything? Hey, maybe we should test and make sure that, you would be safe to get this vaccine."
Man.
Like that's something that should be prevalent in all schools, for kids to be able, for kids 13 and up to be able to make that decision with
Sure.
the help of medical professional.
We want to raise our children to make adult decisions, but we want to
Yeah.
be there to protect them when they do that, right? Like, I want my child to always make a decision. It might not always be the right decision, but either it's a learning lesson or a success story. So I want them to be doing it, not me. I don't want to be a helicopter and tell everybody how to live their lives. I want to be there to help them when they make a mistake, you know?
And I mean, for what what Debbie and I have done with the kids is that we give them the information and we say, look, this decision is up to you. It's
Right,
like
good.
you're an autonomous human being, and you have to be used to making some decisions for yourself.
Right,
We will give you the information that we have. If you want to go out and get more information, absolutely. And, if it's something that changes our minds on something, hey, great. We're
right.
working with the best information that we have. And if you have better information, by all means, bring it to me. I
And
will
one day
take a
your
look at it.
child will, and you'll be like, you're growing up.
Oh, absolutely. Like,
Mhm.
teaching my kids how to function independently while still having a network to ask questions. Like when it comes time for them to be out on their own, like they're already asking me questions now. It's not like when they're out of the house, I'm like, all right, you're on your own. Don't ask me anything else. Bye.
Right, exactly. But that's that you're developing that relationship, you know? I always believe when a child's making a decision and you want to stop them, you tell them what the consequences are. Like, if you don't do that, here's what's going to happen. But if you do go forward, here's the path that you're taking. And you don't want to take that path, right? And then you
Right.
let them decide. And when they realize it's the wrong path and they're like, I didn't listen, I should have. You're like, that's a learning moment. Let me help you fix that, but I'm not going to help you fix this again if you make the same decision, you know?
Right. And that's exactly it is that, I've I've taught my kids several times. It's like, look, there are two ways to learn something. There's the easy way and there's the hard way. And sometimes
Right,
the easy way is literally watching somebody else fuck up or
right.
hearing somebody else's story of screwing up royally. Me
It-
particularly, I've got a lot of lessons on what not to do. Um, but realistically, I mean, like learning how to, I mean, even as an adult, learning how to help kids make independent decisions with the best
yes.
information possible is hard. It's really difficult, especially in this social media era. You know,
Mm,
I've got my oldest comes to me all the time. Hey, hey, I want to do this. I see this on this, ad or this app. Is this true?
right.
And it's like, okay, let's take a look at it and let's see what is going on here. Ooh, no, that's not true. There was some medical information that they were getting about COVID, and they were like, hey, so this person looks like they're a doctor.
Mm,
Uh, and here's the advice that they're giving. Is this information true? And so I, went and I listened to it, and it's like, okay, well, the information seems true. Let's look up the credentials of the person. Sure enough, they're an actual doctor. And it's like, okay, this is actually good information from a doctor. But then on the same token, they were sharing with me some stuff. They're like, hey, is this true? And it's somebody literally dressed up as a nurse who's not actually a practicing nurse,
Right.
giving disinformation about the virus. And it's like, okay, so you see how people are using credentials to try and wage this war. This person looks like they should be trustworthy, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
This person looks like they should be trustworthy, and they are. You can't just go based off of the look. You actually have to dig into the substance of who it is that you're listening to.
Right. And I just found out a weird thing that there's 12 people putting out most of the misinformation out there,
Yep.
and everybody else is just a wannabe. Like there's 12 people actively feeding wannabes who want to become famous for anything. And if they get famous because a bunch of anti-vaxxers are like supporting them, they don't care. They're just happy to be famous, you know?
And that's the problem.
That's the problem right there.
Like the idea of being famous just for the sake of being famous is, well, I mean, it's a narcissistic complex is what it is.
Hmm.
You know, I I don't want to be famous. Like, if I happen to end up being famous, great, fantastic, whatever. I don't care. It's I'm going to do me, and if somebody likes that and a bunch of other people turn out to like it, fantastic. If they
Right.
don't, whatever. Like, I'm not hurt at the end of the day if somebody says they don't like what I'm doing or what I have to say. That's fantastic.
Because you're living the honest you, right?
I'm living the honest me, and I'm trying to live the balance between individual freedom and and human responsibility to, your fellow humans.
Right.
It's it's like there are certain decisions that I'm going to make that are well within my right because I've done my homework and I don't believe that they do affect others. There are
Right.
some decisions I'm going to make where I'm going to be like, I want to do this, but this seems to have a negative effect on my community, and I probably shouldn't do that. It's
Right.
like it's not that I don't think that I don't have the right to do it. It's just that I've reassessed what my balance is, and it's that, you know, I understand that I have an individual right, but I also have a community responsibility.
Right. And you go off the checklist in that order. You know what I mean? I love that
Hmm.
you said that because I've been saying that for years. If I can make a decision that benefits two people instead of just me, I'll make that decision. But if it doesn't affect anybody, and I want to say that like living your life the way you think people want you to be so that they're happy with you is so stressful because you'll
Hmm.
never get it right. But if you just live your life the way you believe morally, you can sleep at night. It doesn't really matter if people fall away because they don't like that. That's you, and you're living the honest you. But
Hmm.
if people are going to get mad at you for living the way you live, they're not the people you want in your life, unless you're living
Absolutely.
a reckless lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like, I believe everybody has the right to do heroin, but I'm not going to be in your life and support you while you do that. You know what I mean?
Right. It's one of those things like, do I think all drugs should be legal?
Mhm.
Yeah, because clearly the war on drugs hasn't worked. Does that
Right,
mean that I'm going to be there to support you when you decide to shoot up fucking smack or
right.
heroin or uh, fucking meth or do crocodile, whatever?
Mhm.
No. It's like
Right.
I hope that there are the resources in place that you need to help you make better decisions,
Yeah.
but I'm not the person to help you with that. And
Yeah. Life,
that's the real answer because I don't have the qualifications to help you with that.
but even different than that, life has its own consequences. You don't
Hmm.
need to be the active consequences. I
No.
don't negatively need to fight somebody doing heroin in Washington State, right?
Right.
Like I might not approve of it, but that's what the hell is that? You know, that sounds like a mother thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
So go ahead and do what you want, but I'm not going to actively fight it or support it. That's my
Hmm.
point. And I feel the same way. If I want to be in my bedroom and tuck my penis between my legs and take pictures like Silence of the Lambs, you don't have to negatively or positively support that. You just have to know that, you don't even have to know it's happening. You know what I mean?
You don't even have to accept it or reject it. You just leave it the
Right.
fuck alone.
But you
Like
don't need to
that's
judge it. You just,
right.
judgment is just this weird thing that we do to fill in space. We don't need to do that. We don't need to judge just to come up with conversational talking points, you know?
Right. And that's the thing is like, inherently, like we all try to sit down and go, ooh, that doesn't look normal. Well,
Right.
the moment that you start to think about what is and isn't normal, like it's very centric to whatever your belief system happens to be. Mine happens to be very individual freedom based with the
Me too.
responsibility to community. So for anybody who wants to choose to do something, how and or for people to finally feel free to represent who they are, I'll just
Right.
leave it at that. For people to finally be free to be themselves, it ain't my job to judge them. It ain't my job to accept or reject them either. It isn't
Right.
my job to be any part of that. If a person feels that they want to include me in that, absolutely, that's fantastic.
Right.
I believe in people being able to express and celebrate who they are. Now, if you're what if you feel that your willingness to express yourself is by murdering me, yeah, that's a different problem. And I'm not going to
Right.
let you to express that one. But
Exactly.
anything else, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. Like I've said, gay marriage doesn't affect me. Straight marriage doesn't affect me. Trans people do not affect me.
Mm-mm.
Like I want them all to feel safe and be able to live their life as they are, not
Right.
as they see fit, as they are,
Yeah.
because they are people. And the fact of the matter is that their responsibility to community is no different than anybody else's.
Right.
It's just
I
that
just,
whatever your belief metric happens to be, you can't force that on anybody else.
I wish people didn't. And it seems like even conservatives are like, no, you deserve your rights, but what about my child? You know what I mean? Like, you're
Right.
affecting my child. And they've done that from music to transgenders to abortion. Like, what you're doing is going to make my child's life bad. And I don't like that. Stop using your shield. Stop judging
Well, it's
people.
not
Like,
even
I
a
don't like that.
it's not even a shield. It's literally a shitty metric.
Yeah.
Because at the same time too, the moment that they find out their kid is gay, then all of a sudden they're pro gay rights. And it's like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? No, 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 no. You understand that just because a gay person has rights, that doesn't mean you have less. And suddenly you're finally figuring that out when your kid comes out to be gay.
Right.
Like that's horseshit. That's
Why are
absolute
you
horseshit is what that is.
Why are you judging it? It's not about judgment, it's about accepting or not accepting. Like you find out who somebody is, and then you choose whether you want to accept them. Do you really want everybody to hide who they are until you get to know them? And then after you invest in them, they feel free to be an asshole? I want to know who everybody is and then decide whether I want to like them from there or not. I do have something else on the COVID topic, and it's
Hmm.
Thursday's story, and I think it's a great way to wrap up, and it is businesses can ask customers if they are vaccinated against COVID-19 without fear of legal recourse, according to legal experts and fact checkers. What do you think of
Hmm.
that?
Ooh, so yes, the more that I've dug into it,
Hmm.
um, basically there's a very fine line in the sand, and this is something that people need to realize, like where HIPAA ends and where responsibility to your business, your clientele
Right.
begins. So, where does that HIPAA line draw? Okay, anytime that you're going to be storing or transmitting medical information, then HIPAA applies. So, for example, if a company you work for said, "Hey, are you vaccinated? Yes or no?" And you say, "Yes, I'm vaccinated." They're like, "Great, cool, that's fine. You're approved to do whatever you want." All right, fantastic. But if a company says, "Hey, are you vaccinated?" and you say yes, and they're like, "Okay, I need a copy of your vaccination record in order to have on file." That's a HIPAA thing because
Okay.
you're asking for actual health information that you plan to store and or transmit.
That's true. That's true. They have the right to ask you. You have the right to not answer.
Exactly.
They have the right to fire you for not answering.
And And I would say even too, like depending on where you work, they have the right to fire you for not being vaccinated,
Mhm.
because and I say this with a grain of salt. We need to There needs to be a differentiation between people who medically cannot get vaccinated
Yes.
and people who choose not to be vaccinated based on any number of metrics, and I would include religious exemptions as part of that.
Okay.
Religious and philosophical, to me, that those exemptions are not about safety, public safety. We have a number of systems in place already where in order to be in the building you have to be vaccinated. Public schools are one of them. You have to have your shots.
It should be anyway.
It is. It is. Every school that I've ever gone to, like, you can't go to school if you're not vaccinated.
It's true. You can't travel overseas unless you get your vaccinations.
Yep. So some
Yeah.
people, when what they have done is they've done homeschooling in order to skirt those requirements. Which, hey, great. That means you're not around people. That means that you're minimally at risk of getting
Right.
infected slash
But you still
infecting
acknowledge the
anyways.
consequences of your non-vaccination.
Right.
You're saying, I don't want to, I'm going to take precautions because I understand the repercussions.
Right. So now this is where things get a little bit hairy, because you depending on how your state is going to handle these kind of questions.
Hmm.
So what is to stop a person from saying, yeah, I'm vaccinated when they're not?
Exactly.
What, what kind of repercussions are there for a person just not wanting to disclose whether or not they're vaccinated? I can understand.
Based on freedoms, I might deny the question even though I'm vaccinated.
Hmm. And as somebody who's vaccinated, it's like, for me, my metric is, do I want to tell people I'm vaccinated? Not
Right.
really. Am I going to tell people I'm vaccinated? Yes. Why? Because for me, I feel a community responsibility to say, hey, look, I've had the vaccine. I'm perfectly fine.
Right.
Like, that's where it is at this point with these vaccines. Like with any of the
Right.
rest of them, nobody asked. I will say that there's legal precedent for people not being able to go places because they're not vaccinated.
Hmm.
But I would also argue that in terms of like testing and stuff, there is no legal precedent for allowing people in, but requiring them to test constantly either.
That's true.
And especially placing that burden on the individual. Like I said, I think there's a very fine line between people who can't be vaccinated and the philosophical and religious exemptions that we constantly see.
Yeah.
I don't think philosophical and religious exemptions should exist in terms of vaccinations. That's my
It's a community responsibility. I put my vaccination card, I took a picture of it, I put it on my phone, it's on my iPad, and then I took the card and put it in my phone case. So I always had it on me, and I wanted to get a t-shirt, you know what I mean? But there is places where I don't want to admit that I got vaccinated. And there's a group of people I just don't want to have that argument with, so I don't tell them one way or another, you know what I mean?
but what's really funny is that the same people who are saying that it's their right to disclose whether or not they're vaccinated are, funny enough, the same people I've seen out in public wearing shirts that say proudly unvaccinated. And I'm like, really?
Yep.
Like, just proudly unvaccinated against COVID, or did you just say fuck the rest of them too? Because, man, oof, that could be a little bit rough.
Well,
Like, especially,
at least your family will know what shirt to bury you in. You know what I mean?
yeah, sweater, because it'll be hot and itchy.
Yeah, well, as long as it says proudly unvaccinated, I'm happy with that. You know what I mean?
You know, and that's just it. Is that
Yeah.
medically speaking, hospitals have access to immunization records.
Yep.
And overwhelmingly, what they're seeing is that the people who are ending up in their emergency rooms are people who aren't vaccinated.
Yep.
In fact, I mean, working out to be about 99.2% of people who are in hospitals are unvaccinated.
Right.
So I
And,
don't know what to tell you. Like,
and
as a math person, if you're as a math person, it's like, there's an 80% chance that there's a 80% chance that I would be an asymptomatic person who got COVID. There's a
Mhm.
20% chance that I would be a person who had COVID. Of that, there is, of all the people that have had COVID, there's about a 1.8% chance that I'm gonna die from having COVID, based on the data that we have.
0.7% in your state.
1.8%. So 1.3% of all COVID cases have resulted in death in the state of Washington,
Ah, okay.
or a 0.7% possibility amongst all of the deaths,
Right.
just the deaths alone. 0.7%
0.7%.
amongst. So 0.7% of 0.7%, literally.
There's
So
a more
points.
there's a greater percent you'll die when you get in your car and drive to go get vaccinated than you will from the vaccination still, right?
You literally have a better chance of being struck by lightning while winning the lottery.
Get vaccinated, you might win the lottery and get struck by lightning. How cool would
Hey, in
that
some
be?
states they're doing vaccine lotteries, so you actually have a better chance of winning the lottery.
Right.
So, like, think about that. That's 0.7% of cases wind up 0.7% of vaccinated cases wind up in the hospital. And of
Right.
that, 0.7% of that winds up wind up dead. Like,
Right.
that's a lot of that's a lot of that's very, 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 very little. That is far less than your chance of ending up dead if you had the flu or pneumonia.
That's true. All right. Well, thanks for listening to Public Access America. I hope we shamed you enough into getting your vaccination because you really should. And I'll just say, liberals are laughing at you every time you die. Not all of them, but a percentage of them. And you don't want to make a liberal happy. Get vaccinated. And,
Hey,
and we're back for the second hour of Public Access America. This is Thursday, and we're going to be talking about Monday because I know, Jeffrey, you love this stuff and I want to get your opinion on it. It turns out that an Israeli company is leasing and selling phone hacking, military grade surveillance technology to autocrats, 40 countries around the world. And people like journalists, all the way to, it's said that Macron from France were all surveilled using this technology. Have you heard about this?
hmm
Ooh, cool. What do you think about it? Should we all just be surveilling everybody all the time? Should we
reality
expect it?
is it's to be expected. I mean, at this point, like, I pretty much live my life of, if somebody wants to hack my phone and see what I'm posting, I'm going to make sure they have to read some of the craziest shit on the record.
Right. Okay.
So, like, the reality is that, even, just as recently as 2015, for example, Apple's phones stored your location data. And you
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to be a hacker in order to download that data, put it into a free mapping software, and be able to understand where you were at every 15 minutes of the day.
Yeah.
Realistically, it was very easy to do that.
Well, find your friends.
Even things like Snapchat show your location, for God's sake.
Hell yeah, it's awesome to know who's in my location. By the way, Snapchat up to a 52-week high at $73. Thank you. Everybody gets Snapchat. I love you. But all of these things now are asking for permission to track me. And I think that's
Mhm.
kind of a step forward. You know what I mean? Like, no, I don't give you permission to track me, Domino's, you know?
I mean, you've already got, but here's the funny thing: is like, when you order Domino's, what do you have to put in order to get delivery?
Oh yeah, I know my zip code and address and everything.
Yeah, or anywhere else you happen to be, if you're in a hotel room, and you want a
Mhm.
pizza. That's the funny thing about tracking is that everybody gets, all upset about tracking while still putting in all of this information in
Right.
order to do everything. Like, realistically, like, your biggest issue should be whether or not you have governments reading your text messages, your emails, listening in on your phone calls. In
Right.
terms of location data, I mean, you're constantly using location data. I guarantee you, if you've had anything shipped,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a fucking secret.
Google to Amazon to your door, yeah. And what about the weather app? What's the weather like? They need to know, you know? They need to
Exactly.
know where you are. But yeah. But I mean, doing
Exactly.
it illegally to world leaders and journalists and activists seems kind of sketchy if you're Viktor Orban from whatever, wherever autocrat he's from these days.
Hungary.
Hungary, that's right. Thank you.
Yep. And the reality is that, to me it's also kind of funny because governments have been doing this to citizens for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And now, these leaders of these countries are pissed that it's happening to them. It's like, okay, get it? Do you get it?
Right.
No?
Like we didn't have a spy sitting in on Vladimir Putin's meetings until Donald Trump threatened to out them. You know what I mean?
Right. So the idea that, it's the idea that somehow it's okay to do this to your average everyday citizen but not to your world leader is
Right.
really fucking funny to me. It one of those rules for thee and not for me things. It's
Right.
like, you're elected, you're a public official, we have the right to know what you're doing.
That's true. That's true. If they are an elected official, they're getting paid a salary, which means they're on the clock, right? Which means I deserve to know what they're talking about.
I deserve to know what they're up to. I mean, that's, you know, you
Hmm.
can you can definitely try and put some curbs on it, like in terms of, intelligence and things like that, like
Mm-hmm.
trying to stop or thwart, safety issues. But the reality is that a lot of the time what you're seeing is people tracking and spying on allies that, like for example, when somebody was it was a somewhat recent article about spying on Germany, and I was like, really? The Germans spying on the Germans? What the fuck are they? What the fuck are you spying on? Like their next Volkswagen? Is that really? Or the next Audi or BMW?
There's a weird movement in Germany building, you know what I mean? And it's just there's a weird movement everywhere, and everybody wants to know everything everybody's doing. It's just a weird time, and
Mm,
but if you're doing your job and you're not sleeping with underage children or doing some other weird thing, then there's no dirt on you, right? And
right.
you should be building technology to fight this because you know it exists, you know?
Well, and as a public official, I mean, pretty much everything that you should be doing should be able to be requested.
Or logged or yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. It's like, there you as a public official, you should be able to have an average, ordinary, everyday citizen come in and see what you're doing.
That's right.
I think honestly it would go a long ways for people feeling like they could trust their governments. But at
Hmm.
the same time too, it's like, I do expect that there's going to be security protocols. Like I honestly don't expect anybody's going to be able to carry a gun in to see the president.
Right.
That's going to be stupid.
They're not
But
going to be able to get access to information about plans that are going to happen. You know what I mean? But
or nuclear information or area
right.
or military testing. There's certain things that you're just not going to be able to get.
But if Joe Biden is eating lunch with one of the Koch brothers, I want to know about that. If Joe Manchin is having a meeting with Republican donors in Texas, I want to know about that.
Absolutely. And
And
I think
journalists
that's
do that. And
mhm.
we shouldn't dismiss the fact that journalists are getting attacked because of the information that these countries are getting, you know?
Right. And I think and this is where part of where journalism has failed is in that 24-hour news cycle,
Hmm.
because people are tired of people are tired of suddenly having to go back and figure out what's the truth because they heard some pundit talking for 24 hours about, one kernel of information and they threw in 99,000 opinions.
Right. And it's all if this happened. You got to listen for that because they're all, this is the story. And then for 45 minutes is this is what might happen. And that's what works us up. And I hate that. I just
Hmm.
hate that, Jeffrey. So
Oh, it's absolutely awful.
how about this one? This one's an awesome one. And it is China
Hmm.
attacking the Microsoft exchange. And I know we've been talking about China doing the hacking, and it's always
Hmm.
nice to know that like Russia isn't the only one. Apparently, Israel is outsourcing the hacking, and we even have China here now hacking Microsoft. What do you think about that?
Annoying as fuck is what it is, because
Yeah.
as it's because as someone who has to use Microsoft servers, it can be a real pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And the reality is that China is definitely pushing their luck and pushing their limits in terms of what they're going to be allowed to do.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that Trump had every chance to crack down on this shit when he was in office and chose not to.
Right.
Biden, I'm watching. If he doesn't, then this is clearly an issue of, well, I guess we're just gonna pay to play the game, and it's really annoying because this game is affecting everyday average people and businesses, and it's becoming a real pain in the ass.
Well, he did issue a warning that Hong Kong is a hostile environment now, and for all companies that are there to know that this is the path it's going on. So I like what he did in Hong Kong. I wish there was a way to push back on China. You know what I mean? Because Hong Kong is so important in that democracy um, area for showcasing democracy, and
It was.
yeah, it
It's
just
not
got
anymore.
snuffed out, and we need to
Taiwan is
recognize that.
Taiwan is literally the last line there,
Yeah,
and
it's
and
falling, by the way.
that's the tough part is that we've sold a lot of tech to Taiwan for
Hmm.
self defense, and you have countries like South Korea and Japan willing to go to Taiwan's defense,
Right.
because it literally is going to be an issue for Japan if China ends
Hmm.
up going after Taiwan, because it's only going to be a matter of time before they start fucking with Japan, and Japan
Yeah.
realizes this.
Yeah.
So it's a very complicated relationship there, and the question of whether or not we're going to stay involved is going to be interesting. um,
We're
I
looking
think
to um, offer immigration to, I don't can't remember how many it is, hundreds of thousands of activists and democracy supporters in Hong Kong. And
mhm,
what do you think of that?
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, me too.
To me, I'm the kind of person where I still think that there is the potential for the American idea to be alive and well,
Me too.
although it's quite sick right now. um, and people who truly believe in democracy do have a place in the United States. That should be the case.
Hmm.
Um, and people who don't have that same view, well, you clearly don't know the history of this country.
Yeah. It's just weird to me, and I'm just going to say it, that it all falls. It's like democracy is a Lamborghini, a beautiful Lamborghini. But if Mitch McConnell's behind the wheel, driving at 2 miles an hour and hitting cows on the side of the road, it's an ugly thing, and
Hmm.
nobody wants to be a part of it. But when democracy is used correctly, not capitalism, democracy, it is a shining beacon. It is awesome to have everybody included. But for Mitch McConnell to warp the version of what government is disgusting. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The fact that he has 35 people outranking 54 people is just weird to me. And that nobody sees that he's the red tape that we claim to hate. I mean,
Hmm.
Republicans are always like, cut the regulations, let's get shit done, let's get shit done. And Mitch McConnell's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that for you. And
Hmm.
it bugs me that people don't see that he is such a major, not that somebody else wouldn't just step up into the role, you know what I mean?
Right, right. I mean,
So,
I fully have every confidence in the Republican Party to find some other obstructionist to take Mitch McConnell's place.
right. Somebody was saying it, and I think it's so funny. I think it was Mehdi Hassan, which I don't really care for, but he has a lot of good points. And he said we're constantly looking for Republicans to take the off ramp that we're offering them, but they're already off the rails. They've been off the rails for years, and we just don't want to admit that it's that bad. No,
Well,
they're
oh yeah.
gone. They are a post policy party. They are
Oh,
obstruction
absolutely.
and grievance. That's all they are.
And they're not even for actual government and financial conservative
Right.
policies anymore. I think the best meme I saw about Republicans was the libertarian group calling them yeehaw socialists, because it's like, look, they don't, it was clear that they didn't give a shit about how much money was being spent.
Right.
They were more than happy to spend the same amount of money just on other things.
Right. And they're
You
more than
know,
happy to take credit for what this Joe Biden stimulus package did, as well as taking credit for not supporting it.
yep, absolutely. So, I mean,
And
to
their
me, it's
voters don't see it. It's just so weird to me.
it's like, the fact of the matter is that they're the only conservative that they actually claim to be is religious, and that's really about as far as it goes. And even then, they don't even hold to those fucking policies at all.
Right.
It's like gays are bad, and then one of them gets caught sucking dick in an airport bathroom. Gays are bad. Kid turns out to be gay. Trans is bad. They've got somebody in their caucus that is trans. It's
I
like
hope so.
they literally are they don't, I don't even know what the fuck they're on anymore, because it's not what they were. And for as much as they claim to have loved Reagan is probably fucking spinning circles in his grave and could be a generator for clean energy at this point.
Yeah. Well, somebody said, and it was really smart, Democrats are moving the social norms. And so Republicans are seeing that as a social attack. And so they're social grievancing about the norms being moved. Democrats didn't move those norms. They're recognizing that the norms have moved. And that's the
Hmm.
big disconnect with Republicans. They think the norms are what are in their ecosystem because they never look beyond their ecosystem. They just look for validation. So they're watching Sinclair and Fox News and OAN going, oh, the world is just how I see it. While Democrats, surprisingly enough, will watch Fox and will watch OAN and learn what they're talking about to argue those points because transgenders are normal. It's a
Hmm.
normal thing for people to be happy in this world and whatever it takes to get there. Why Republicans feel they have a grievance towards everything is just weird. They're trying to pull social norms back to 1964, and that's not where we are.
Well, and let's not forget that even just as little as 20 years ago, the Democratic Party wasn't exactly friendly with the LGBTQ community.
Agreed. Agreed. Gay marriage
So,
wasn't a thing until Obama, right?
yeah. So even 10 years ago, it took that long. And so even within the party, even within the Democratic Party, support for LGBTQ is relatively new.
Right.
So, and it's not that these things weren't around before that. They were around for a long, 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 long time before that. I mean, you can
Yeah.
go clear back to Stonewall.
Yep.
It took them 40 years from that event to finally be like, okay, maybe we should support this base.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
then it's
maybe
only
we
been
should.
10 years of them quote unquote supporting the base.
Right. And they still shit on the disabled. And they still take the BLM movement for take them advantage of them. And they still assume that they're going to get the immigration vote. And they don't treat any of those groups with any care, you know? Although
Hmm.
I will say they're trying to pander to the BLM movement. And I really do think that the LGBT community has had a lasting effect on the Democratic Party. And
Hmm.
I think the Black Caucus will too, once the Black Caucus recognizes the next group that needs to be recognized. And I think that's how it's going to work. Once the Black Caucus sees the disabled movement as an ally, then they will get their rights and we will all work on getting disabled people their rights. And I think that's how it works. But we need to get there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Sorry.
And
I had a tweet to Al Sharpton the other day, and it was, can somebody please wake Al Sharpton on the tone on the word intersectionality before he destroys every effort to suppress the suppression
yeah.
because he's making it a single demographic issue. He's saying it's a black issue. Well, there's only 49 million, 45 million black people in the country, and out of them, only what, maybe 35, 40 million can vote. depending on how many children there is. So if you're making it a black person issue, white people don't care, right? Like if you make abortion a woman issue, and I don't, and then I don't care, right? Because it's not my issue. You're excluding me. You need to include me, and that's where the intersectionality comes in, especially with voting rights. You know what I mean?
Hmm. And and this is where it gets tough, because like you have to, like, not insert yourself, but you have to be involved and in
Mhm.
some way, shape, or form, or at least be allowed to participate.
Yeah,
And that's been one of the biggest problems of identity politics, is that I would say that it's not that we don't need people of various identities. It's just that people of various identities don't want anybody else's support in some cases, and it's like
right.
that's not how you build movements. It's if you look back to how Dr. King built the civil rights movement, it wasn't like, hey, we want civil rights, but only black people can be involved.
Right. He was telling white people, look at this, look how it affects you.
Exactly. And so when you add people in to the movement, that's how you create successful movements.
That's a coalition.
And without getting that outside support, or wanting to bring in that outside support. And this is where people need to understand, it's that, you know, when it comes to the one issue, like, you have to stay focused on the one issue.
Yep.
Like don't get me wrong, like, when it comes to, Black Lives Matter, clearly, like, have to say it, when we're focused on why Black Lives Matter, it's not the time to bring in, disabled lives.
That's right. No, that's right. That's right.
But there is the understanding that there are disabled Black people that are going to have a few more bones to pick. and
Right. Yes.
and so it's like, you have to have the movement has to be inclusive of as many people as possible to stay focused on one idea.
Yes.
It's this Occam's razor. It's that, you can have a singular movement that's focused on one thing. It's when you start trying to bring in all these other focuses that they fall apart. It's
Hmm.
like, Occupy Wall Street back in 2011. Wall Street was a problem. It's taken 10 years for Democrats to finally be like, you know what, these major tech companies are a problem.
Yep.
This Wall Street stuff is a problem. Not that they haven't had any issues taking advantage of Wall Street in the face of all the chaos that's happened. Looking at, was it
Hmm.
Nancy Pelosi's husband that suddenly sold off a bunch of stock right before they locked the country down?
They they all did that.
I
Margie
mean, they all
Taylor
did it.
Greene. And yeah, yeah. They all
So,
they all invested. Richard Burke actually got caught doing it. So yeah.
yep. So I mean, like, like, if they could have stayed focused on the Wall Street issue.
Hmm.
But the fact of the matter was is that they tried to bring in several different things, and then they all disagreed on, what needed to be the primary focus, and then the Occupy Wall Street movement just fell the fuck apart. And that's honestly what would have happened with the civil rights era, had we gone like civil rights. Okay, well, now we're going to add in X, Y, and Z issues of the time.
Oh,
It's like,
sure. I'm just trying to say, why should the disabled people care about black rights? You know, and you need to elevator pitch that. You need
mhm,
to elevator pitch your thing to white men because it's mostly white men that are making the decisions. So you need to work on your pitch and you need to tailor your message to the group you're talking to. I'm not saying Al Sharpton needs to talk about, how oppression of black people affects white people in his church congregation, but when he's talking to a majority white crowd saying, this only affects black people, you're really diminishing it and you're excluding everybody else, and you need to let them know that having 49 million angry oppressed people living as your neighbors is bad for you. And you don't want that. You want everybody to have the same rights. You don't want
mhm.
this affecting you negatively as a society. And you need to tell white people that. You need to tell people, guess what? George Floyd died because he was black, right? But he got assaulted because he was disabled. And you need to tie that in as an intersectionality there. You don't make it the whole point, but you say, hey, guess what? Maybe possibly think this way too, you know?
And that's, George Floyd dying was very much a black issue, but George Floyd dying was also very much a police issue. because
Yes.
George Floyd is not the first person to die by police hands. Disproportionately, black people die by police hands. Yes.
Hmm?
Black people end up incarcerated disproportionately. Yes. The data proves it.
Right.
But, and that's where it's like, the issue while also focusing on the fact that black people are disproportionately affected, you bring in that message of, hey, yeah, today it was George Floyd being kneeled on and
Right.
unable to breathe. Who's to say tomorrow it isn't you, white person? I mean,
Do
that's
you
what
have
Ruth Bader's.
claustrophobia? Do you have claustrophobia, white person? Do you have anxiety? Could you be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Boom, it could happen to you.
I mean, that's the tactic that Ruth Bader Ginsburg used. It
Mhm.
wasn't that Ruth
Yes.
Bader Ginsburg went, okay, well this issue affects women, and then a bunch of men went, okay, cool, that's good for
That's
you,
fine.
whatever.
Whatever.
But Ruth Bader Ginsburg took the issue that affected women and say, hey men, this is how this affects you, and they all went, oh shit, that's a problem.
Right. And that's where I'm trying to come from because the defund the police movement was actually what it was saying was fund more mental care, right?
Hmm.
And so not to use George Floyd as example at this time after what it was, to say, see, this is the perfect example of where mental health care coming in first might have helped, right? Like
Hmm.
he didn't do anything violent. And
No.
now states all over the country are dispatching mental care healthcare workers to
Hmm.
these scenarios. If they had done that to George Floyd, nobody would have been there to kneel on him because he was black. And it's important. George Floyd is one of those things, and that's why it was so big. It affected so many issues from
Hmm.
community, not
Hmm.
federal. It was a community thing. And it was like it showed everybody what we could clean up in our community if we didn't rely on the federal government to do it, you
Hmm.
know? And it just showed all of it, all of the stuff we needed to fix in one spot, like,
Right. And
oh,
and and now now it's like you've got people that are complaining about the fact that police don't just get to randomly pull people over. It's like, change the metric. It's like, why do you need to pull somebody over? Like,
right.
at this point it's like, look, it's like, okay, so the one that is my favorite right now is the whole, well, if somebody is going to get a speeding ticket and you don't pull them over to verify their identity, then how do you know who gets the speeding ticket? It's like, well, here's a question: who's driving the vehicle? Who's driving the vehicle? let's
I'm,
let's just ask that question right now: who's driving the vehicle?
I don't know.
Well, either the owner is going to be like, well, it wasn't me. Okay, so then who was it? Are you going to throw your kid under the bus for driving that fast?
Right.
Friend? What's your friend going to do? Say no? So I get it. Like, I get why people want to be like, well, you need to pull somebody over to verify, but at the same time, no, you really don't.
Well,
It's like the vehicle was doing in excess of the speed limit. It is the owner's responsibility.
right. You could literally type out the ticket in your computer while you're driving, while you're following the person. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to
Absolutely.
be a pullover type thing. Yeah, it's those moments of engagement that we need to understand. See, you get it. It's a timeline thing. This happened because this happened, and then this happened because that happened. And
Hmm.
it's a cause and effect thing. And if we don't stop the cause as far in the beginning as possible, then you're going to have that cascade somewhere in the chain. You know what I mean?
Yep. So literally the metric is that you just have to change how you deal with people.
Yeah,
It's like we were actually just talking about it in the house today. It's like, it's not that I don't need cops. I just don't need cops dealing with mental health issues because I don't need a hammer where I need a set of pliers.
exactly. Exactly.
And that's really the difference. It's like, I need the cops dealing with actual domestic violence, actual violent criminals, murders,
Right.
rapes, kidnaps. I need the cops actually dealing with those, not somebody
Yes.
having mental health issues. I need
Right.
behavioral health people dealing with mental health issues.
And having a team of police officers come to a mental disturbance takes them away from that sex trafficking, and so we want them investigating the things we want them investigating, like, I don't know,
Right.
like
Or
they
have community peace officers, and literally their job is just to walk around the community. They're not carrying a sidearm. They're
right.
they're just trying to figure out what's going on within the community to get some data points to say, hey, this is where we need to dedicate resources, is in this area.
Yeah, and make it a team of moms, right? They're saying that women have been displaced out of the job market. Just make these community police officers moms, you know what I mean?
You know, like, you know, there's so much you know, all of those feel good stories that we see about cops. Oh, well, this person's car was broke
Mhm,
down and they didn't know how to. Great. You know what? A community peace officer that's out there helping people with some of their simple stuff. You
mhm,
know, it's like, why do we want to spend time getting people run through the system that costs taxpayer money to afford them a lawyer, to have the judge sitting there dealing with non-violent cases? Like,
right.
there's no point to that.
And this is,
There's
you know,
no point.
this is something I really agree with the Republicans on because Joe Biden wants to further fund the police, give them more resources for more education and training. But you're basically just training a shitbag anyway, right? In some instances. But like the Republicans, they believe in not funding the police, like taking funding away from communities with a discretionary fund to use it for, you know, the police and criminal activities. They don't want to fund the Capitol Police. And in a way that causes, I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm sorry. I tried. I really tried. I really tried.
It's one of those things where it's like I can understand why, but like the Republicans, they don't want to fund the police because they're butthurt that the police aren't just backing them, you know, blindly after they got fucking attacked blindly.
Right.
You know, they arrived at the right conclusion the wrong way. It's like, okay, I, you made it to there. I don't know how the fuck you got there from what your thought process was, but okay.
Yeah.
You know, and the reality is that, like like we've talked about before, defund the police is like a really fucking bad misnomer of a
Yeah.
title.
Oh yeah.
It's like, yes, you know, you don't want to fund military shit going to cops, but really what you want to fund is more community efforts that help cops, you know, reduce their workload to where they're actually working on the
Right.
things that you actually need them working on.
Refund the police. And let's not forget that Donald Trump took a lot of money away from military housing and education for the border wall. I don't want that to go without being said that yeah, Republicans for the past 5 years have been about defunding the military, about defunding the police. That's what they've been, which is why we are where we are.
Yeah. So it just like the metric has to change. You
Hmm.
know, we all recognize that the metric has to change, and so why why this is such a sticking point right now for some is just absolutely interesting to me.
Could we just like honestly evaluate the parties and then go to the side that we actually want instead of the rhetoric? Like instead of Republicans saying we believe in military, say, yeah, now we believe in not funding the military. Do you support that? You know? And the Democrats can be like, hey, guess what? We believe in a 1/6 commission. You know, do you support that? Why does it have to be like all spun so that like you, so that the people that support you don't know who they're supporting? Why do you have to spin it all like that?
Because
Why
you
can't
need
you be
sound bites. You need sound bites to own the libs or own the Republicans or whatever.
make
It's
sound
not
bites to
actually
own your party? Make sound bites to own your constituents. You know what I mean? Like,
like make sound bites of, hey, this is what we actually got done.
right. Why is Matt Gaetz in fucking California when his fucking constituents are in Florida? Why are you with Marjorie Taylor Greene in a hotel room getting it on in some weird white supremacist fashion
Oh,
when you should be, I know, right? When you should be in
there's a mental
Florida,
image.
you know?
The idea of Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene having sex is like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I
It would
wouldn't
be
want to
like,
clean that hotel room, right?
oh god, you have to cleanse that with fire. I feel like I
Right?
need to start my pistol after that fucking
Oh,
thought. Ugh.
God. If she's not past baby raising age, that would be a bad child to have come out into this world, you know? Because you know
Oh,
Donald Trump, Satan would be its father. Like
oh
it's
Christ.
godfather or something. But anyway, that's what they're doing, and they're going around the country knocking boots and having speeches about the devastation of our democracy. But I don't think either one of them knows what it is. They're just seeing the fundraising that they're doing and they're having fun with it. Hey.
Well, until people decide to stop fucking funding politicians and spending
Mhm.
money on them, like
Yes.
Like that's like this is what's really fucking hilarious is a bunch of
Yeah.
people complaining about all these rich wealthy elites, whether you're on the left or the right doesn't matter. You
Hmm.
keep funding fucking politicians to live that fucking lifestyle. Quit it.
Right. Right.
Fucking stop.
It made me laugh because I was like, so Matt Gaetz was paying younger women, but then he realized he got in trouble for that. So he found an older rich woman to pay him. Like he just turned it on its head. And now he's Marjorie Taylor Greene's like little ring boy. You know what I mean? And he's
Oh
getting
god.
paid to do that. Oh, I just got to keep coming back to it. It's so disgusting. It's like this. So disgusting.
I think I'd rather choke. Yeah.
But Jeffrey,
Oof. Yeah.
you know, there is millions of middle-aged millennials, and I don't think people understand that millennials aren't those basement-dwelling 20-year-olds we used to know about. Do you know the average millennial is $128,000 in debt?
Sounds about right.
And people have this stigma about millennials. You're 35, I'm 50, so I'm right on the edge of I don't know what I am. I'm not a boomer. I think I'm an
You're
X.
yeah, you're an X.
So I think I looked it up and I think I'm an X. But I really do have a lot of sympathy for millennials. They get a bad rap and they've grown up in the age of where you can't buy a diamond ring to get married. You can't buy a house and settle down. You can't have a two-car family. You have to have a four-job income just to survive. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yep.
Is it something you can talk about? You in debt?
Oh fuck, am I in debt?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So let's start with why am I in debt? So, when I was graduating high school, we were constantly fed from our parents and from our teachers. The only way that you're going to get a good paying job is you got to go get a 4-year degree. Which in their generation that was absolutely the truth. Getting a
Right.
4-year degree meant that you were going to have a good paying job. But by the time I got there, the realization was that the 4-year degree wasn't necessarily going to guarantee you anything, and that oftentimes the requirements for getting certain jobs didn't match the level of education that you needed. Like my first job out of getting my bachelor's degree, quite literally, I would say that, a month of adult education classes would have easily done the job. Quite literally, answer phones,
Yeah.
respond to emails,
Right.
you know it turns out that I had a wider variety of skill sets, and that made me useful in a variety of other different fashions, but they
Right.
weren't requirements of the job. It just
Right.
then turned out that all of those things that I could do then suddenly got incorporated into the job that I was originally hired for, and I didn't get paid
Right.
anymore for it.
So you didn't get your promotions based on your education, but more on your skill set.
Right. And really the skill set was is that they needed somebody who could do some simple things like word formatting and printing and faxing and answering telephone calls, responding to emails, running and getting the mail and
Not
picking up supplies. You
not
don't need a 4-year degree for that.
not being
You
an
don't.
asshole. Not being an asshole when you're asked to do it.
Right. Like I would argue that if you really wanted to say that a 2-year degree was what you needed, fine.
Hmm.
Just to get some time and experience using the programs under your belt, sure.
Right, right,
But they definitely weren't things that required a bachelor's degree. Not at all. Because you think about it, it's like what I went to school for was, to understand policy and how policy affects businesses, how
right,
decisions affect businesses. When went to school for business management, it wasn't just so that way I had a degree saying, yeah, I know how to go check the mail and pick up supplies at Staples.
right.
It doesn't make any sense. The requirements don't meet the actual needs, and so that's something that I'm struggling with having to teach my kids is that there's this reality that you know a 4-year degree or a master's degree should get you a really good paying job, but you're going to be in debt for most of your adult life. And
Yeah.
so all these ideas of buying a car and buying a house and all this other stuff just doesn't equate, because
Mm-mm.
as soon as you get out of school, you're going to be spending $600 a month on student loan debt.
Yep.
And
And when
so,
you have a job, you're going to be looking for a job with better pay. So you don't want to be um you don't want to be hamstrung by all that stuff, by all the stuff like couches, and that's what I noticed in my family. A lot of them, they travel light because they do move of jobs a lot, you know?
mhm. So it's, and you get used to the idea that, everything that like, you're never going to own anything. You're never going
Right.
to, own your own house. You're constantly going to be paying for a car long enough, you're going to be paying for it for 6 years. And by the time you're done paying for it for 6 years, it's time for you to go trade that car in and get a new car. And you ain't going to
Mm-hmm.
get shit for that car. So you're going to end up with another loan
Right.
on top of the student loan debt that you currently have and on top of your rent payments. And oh, by the way, if you've got a job that doesn't have benefits, you're paying for health insurance. And
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, and then you're supposed to save for retirement after all of those fucking expenses.
Right.
So God forbid, it's like, I understand why people nowadays don't want to have kids. They can't even fucking afford the things that they actually need to just go to their job.
It cost around $1 million to raise a kid from 0 to 18, you know?
Yeah.
That's out of the reach of most people, and I don't understand why people are like, "Hey, guess what? I just had a kid." I just don't understand. Like, I don't understand. Like, you made the decision. Like, at one point, you were like, "I guess I'm gonna go another million into debt. Why not? We got one. Let's go for two." I mean, at a
Hmm.
certain point, the government will start paying me back for having these kids. I
You
guess
would
it
think,
works.
but that ain't going to be the case. So
Hmm.
the reality is that with all of this is that it doesn't make sense the way our financial requirements are. And the younger generation is finally starting to see that, and
Mm-hmm.
we're starting to tell them the truth about the matter is that the theory is that yes, a 4-year degree should get you a really great paying job. The reality is that a 4-year degree is going to get you nothing different than if you just had started from the ground up somewhere else
Right.
and just worked your way up that way.
I think that's a viable alternative, is to get in on the ground floor and stay there, you know. There's things that limit you, you know, and
Like,
but you got to remember that, like, I had a job for 14 years. I never went any higher than manage, like, supervisor, because they knew I got high, you know what I mean? So that
mhm.
was a limit. My education, I had a high school education. They were not going to put me into management because of that. So there is things that you need to understand about it, but you can also go with the flow of a company, you know? And I like that. If you can find a good company, get in there, stick with it.
Absolutely, and especially if you find a company that's willing to promote within number one and
Oh yeah.
train you to promote from within number two.
Right.
Those are fantastic things, because the reality is that there are companies that are willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can find those companies and get in on that level and make your way up, you're going to do it without having to go through all the education requirements. Or even that, some companies will actually pay for you to get educated
That's my
in
point.
those.
That's what I'm saying. Once they know what they specifically want you to do and what they need from you to learn, then yeah, send that person to school, you know? You can get 2 years of free school now, thanks to the new infrastructure bill. So that's a great way to go, is let your company build you in the way you need to be built and stay with that company. But companies need to treat, I think, millennials, I think what you guys dealt with was, I think America became a debt niche market, consumer market. I think people made money off of debt and it became a commodity. And I think you guys were the generation that were
Took the
affected.
blame. Well, and
Well,
that's where they're like,
here,
millennials are killing the going out and eating market. Millennials are killing the house building market. Millennials aren't killing shit. Millennials can't afford to do any of
that's
those
what I'm
fucking
saying.
things.
Like when I was in my 20s, 21 or so, I used to start getting cards like, here, have a free credit card, 28% interest, but take it. And I think that's where it started, and it's just become, how can we keep people in debt? School? Oh, okay. Medical? Yeah. Oh, and they're just piling on debts. Like, hey, have
Hmm.
Hulu. Go ahead, have Hulu, cable, electricity, rent. All these things can go up or down. You don't have any control over that, but you better make enough to deal with it.
Hmm.
And that's what I think millennials are going through, just being sucked. Like, it's a giant vacuum over their heads, sucking the money out before they even make it.
with that, it's like, you've got all of these industries that are like, how are we going to get millennials to buy X, Y, and Z, and how are we going to
Yeah,
get the younger generations? Like, well, you have to figure out how to get them out of debt, because
yeah,
that's the reality is that you ain't buying anything when you're in debt.
right.
It's just not happening.
Right. And if you're gonna close your store, keep it open 2 days a week, Dollar General, because you can't find people to work there. Pay them more.
Right. It's, and don't require these fucking heinous degrees in
Hmm.
order to do things that don't require a degree.
That's right. That's right. And people should understand there's plenty of jobs out there where you can grow and learn. Like I was a mechanic for a while. I loved that. I learned how to do brakes. I was a forklift driver for a while. I ran the UPS station. I learned all these skills that made me who I am today. I was a plumber's assistant for a while for some weird reason, you know. So
Right.
I don't know. I loved it, and I grew with those places, and then used my knowledge to find better jobs, doing better, bigger things. You know what I mean?
Hmm. And also too, it's like, figuring out how you can effectively educate
Hmm.
and keep costs down too.
Yeah.
Like, do you really have to spend 20 grand a year to go to school? Like, what is the actual cost? Because let me tell you something, like, some of us are real fucking tired of paying for athletic complexes and then have to buy tickets to go fucking see the games.
Right? Exactly. Tallahassee spent $80,000 to build a new convention complex. For $18,000 more, they could have gotten broadband for the entirety of Tallahassee. They said no. They said yes to the complex, but no to the broadband.
Meanwhile, if you would have actually had broadband in all of Tallahassee, you probably would have had better ability for small businesses to do what they needed to do as a tax generating system.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So it's just, yeah. I think you guys got screwed. I'm really sorry about that. But I
yeah.
want to end on a good note. Wait, what do you want to, did you have any song? Yeah, do
No,
you
no,
have any
no.
more? Okay.
Nah.
All right. So I was watching Bob's Burgers. You like that?
Oh,
You
I love
watch
Bob's
Bob's
Burgers.
Burgers, right? Remember the Blob episode? The ugly plankton that was in the marina that glue at night, you know?
No, I didn't see that episode.
Okay. There was an ugly blob. Gene was eating oysters. He found out that, plankton feeds the oysters, which feed the bigger fish, and on and on and on. And I was like, plankton. And then I remember like this, how the universe works things, where it was plankton that was like the first life on the planet that created so much oxygen. It created the ice age. And I was like, plankton. So I looked up plankton farms. Do you know there's actually plankton farms in development right now to
Mhm.
monitor sea levels, to curate plankton? And I think this is amazing. Now I learned that too much plankton in one place creates algae blooms, and Florida
Mhm.
had that red tide. And that made me really leery about bringing it up, but we do have like 15 minutes left, and I think it's a really cool idea. Plankton farms. Can we just cover the ocean with plankton, or would we all die? You know?
Well, so, like, I would say that plankton is just one piece of the puzzle that we obviously have issues with. You know, my honest to God first thought is that we need a mass concentrated effort on getting the garbage out of the ocean, because
Right.
those areas are actually like, so there's a bunch of great satellite data out there that are showing those places where those garbage patches exist are actually significantly warmer, and so you've
Hmm.
got ocean warming there because they're heat sinks.
Right, right.
I mean, and I would also argue too that perhaps, as we're starting to find out, like, we can create algae that eats plastic and breaks it down.
Really? See, that's why I
Hmm.
love talking to you about this kind of stuff. It just starts the whole thought process of what we could do if we focused on it, you know?
So I mean, like there has to be a concentrated effort on how you solve some of these problems,
Yeah.
right? I mean, right now you have a huge drought issue, and building desalination plants in order to keep cities fed, to keep agricultural
Hmm.
water systems fed. Those are important things to do.
Oh, sure.
And and the fact of the matter is that everybody keeps like trying to like find the silver bullet. rather than look at Occam's razor and say, okay, it's actually a combination of several things that we have to
Yeah,
do in order to fix things.
right.
Plankton is going to help get more oxygen into the air and into the water. Yes.
So plankton plays its part because right now
Plankton plays
the
a part. Yes.
Brazilian rainforest is actually a deficit oxygen creator. Right now, it is creating more carbon dioxide than it is oxygen. And
Hmm.
that's really sad to me. But the oceans put out more oxygen than all the rainforests combined if we could clean them up and get them active again. And yeah, I love the idea of plankton. It's such a micronutrient. It's like this single-celled organism that just farts oxygen. You know what I mean? Like it's so
And that's
cool.
and that's just it, is like, all of this is going to play a real part. You got to get plankton back into the ocean, but you have to clean up the ocean so that way plankton can actually thrive a bit better. You have to
Definitely.
have algae balances in order to, because you're going to have a balanced ecosystem in order to get things to work out. You're going to have to plant more trees in places where, tree population is struggling. There's great
Hmm.
examples of where there were deserts, but now there are oases because people are planting trees and they're just continuing planting trees. And you've got animals coming back to places that they haven't been in 50 years.
I love that.
You need to pull the plastic out of the ocean and be able to reuse that in ways that make sense, or be able to pull it out of the ocean and use it to make new fuel or new products or whatever you're going to do with it. You have
Right.
to desalinate so that way you're not robbing water from inland water sources.
Hmm.
Because let's be realistic here. It's like, if you're going to keep pulling water just to feed the cities, eventually you're going to run out of water for agriculture. You're going to want to run out of water for fish. You're going to run
Right.
out of water for entertainment. And so by pulling water from we're not worried about the ocean level sinking at this point. So I don't know what the fuck we're waiting on.
Right. Right.
So like, it's all of these concentrated efforts. It's Occam's razor. It's not that it's one thing that's going to cure it all. It's that there's about 10 things that we have to work on, and we
Right.
have to do it in concert.
Yeah. But algae has a part in that, and I love that.
Algae has a part. Plankton has a part in it, and major fish, fish and whales and all this other
yeah, yeah,
stuff
yeah.
have its part. So.
We gotta get back to growing and stop killing. You know what I mean? Instead of depleting the resources, I really like that idea of vegetation. What I like is that I just had this random thought because I was high watching Bob's Burgers, and then I went and researched it and found out somebody had that thought before me, and they're smarter and they're doing it. You
Mhm.
know? And
Like.
the article's in the description of this podcast, and if anybody wants to talk on it, I'm ignorant on the issue, but I want to start it. I want to start this plankton conversation because it goes with our 3E gardens or our
Mhm.
community gardens, and I love the idea of more vegetation everywhere. You know,
Mhm.
somebody asked me like, "Do you prefer fruits or vegetables?" And I was like, "It's all just vegetation." Like I don't get it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Right. And so, and with all of this, it's really just a question of how much are people willing to do? Like, I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
So many people are pissed at the idea of nuclear, but the reality is that nuclear is great for generating power and it's great for desalinating, and which means that,
Hmm.
lakes are going to be allowed to, fill up as they need to, and
Yeah,
you're going to be able to desalinate water for agricultural and drinking purposes. There's no reason in the day of technology, when we're concerned about ocean level rise,
right,
that we should be continuing to pull water from mountains, lakes, and rivers when we can desalinate perfectly good water
right.
and use it to feed major cities up and down the coast, or pump it inland for agricultural purposes, because there's plenty of agricultural stuff right around city areas that are still
Uh-huh.
within coastline reaches.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There is no reason at this point, technologically speaking, why that process needs to continue. And until people start to wake up and realize that this is going to be the best way to do that, that's going to protect some of the things that they really want, like food and
Hmm.
wildlife, they're just going to continue to be part of the problem.
Yeah, and how much are you willing to accept? I think that's where it comes down to where do people have enough, and then exposing them to it until they found out that that's too much. Like people don't care. If you're in the Midwest, you really don't give a fuck how much garbage is in the ocean until you realize that it's killing your corn because people are dumping it there. You know what I
because
mean? And
because it's actually raining microplastics.
right, or heating up the planet to where your crops are
Not getting,
scorched.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you've got a higher concentration of water in the atmosphere, and it's not getting cold enough to condense it.
Right. We need more oxygen in the atmosphere because that's what cools everything down. Carbon dioxide heats it up. Oxygen cools it down. We got to get into the air conditioning flow because I can't not take 115 degrees in July. You know what I mean? I just can't take this. It's so
Yeah,
hot.
it sucked. It
So
sucked ass.
man,
So it's, yeah, people have to decide what is the end goal and then do what it takes to meet the end goal. And that's and stop getting lost in all these little sidetrack processes. If the
right.
end goal is clean energy,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm telling people right now, nuclear is a great clean energy. Yes, I get that it goes bad, but it's old reactor styles that you're used to thinking about. And until we can get even more solar or fusion reactors, mini sun reactors that are clean energy and power on demand, like those are solutions to make in the interim until we have better solutions in place. That, you're looking at, Germany's pretty much phased out of the last of its fossil fuel stuff. I think Scotland is pretty much running entirely on renewable energies at this point. Like, it's possible to do it for
Mm-hmm.
larger cities and countries. Like, you have to think about you have to have a different balance, and that balance
Yeah.
has to include nuclear until it's fusion. And once you do fusion, great.
I think we stopped as a nation like trying and just accepted excuses. Can we send a man to the moon? Probably not. So let's not do it. We did it
Yeah, we've done
once.
it
We we
before
we were
several
lucky we did it
times.
once. We don't want to try that again. We had success. We don't want to fail. Like I think
Right.
we just accepted excuses as a nation, and I don't know when that started. It's just I don't know. I like that we think out of the box. I like that we think anything.
Well, and that's, and that's part of that's part of like why we're apolitical. It's that, we're discussing solutions, not just
Hmm.
bitching about the problem.
Yeah,
It's like
I
there
like that.
there are viable solutions out there. You just have to quit playing politics to accept, to pick the right solution.
I think by accepting the politics of it, you're accepting the excuses that it can't be done because I don't ever see
Absolutely.
I see politicians saying it can get done when they know it can't get done. I don't you're not going to tell me that Nancy Pelosi would have taken dark money out of politics knowing that bill would have passed, right?
Right.
Like she doesn't want dark money out of politics any more than Mitch McConnell does, but she's going to try and pass it to make Mitch McConnell look bad. But she never would have
Right.
passed that if it would have gone through. That's
Oh,
the
hell
thing.
no. Hell
She
no.
knew somebody else was going to stop voting rights, so she was like, haha, I'm going to pass it. And that's what's going on. Nobody wants to get dark money out of politics. That's the poison pill of S1, of HR1. If they took that out of the bill, I bet you it would get unanimous support, you know?
Probably.
Probably.
But they want to make sure that they themselves get paid, and that's that.
Yeah, but they shouldn't get paid by us. I want to say I'm going to wrap up on this and I'm going to say that, Donald Trump, he earned 75 he defunded white supremacists to the tune of $75 million in the past 6 months. He's gotten he's gotten the rights taken away from 500 radicals to where they can't vote anymore and they can't own a gun anymore. And he's convinced every other Republican voter to die before they take the vaccine he made. And he did all of that without Facebook or Twitter. So think about that.
Yep.
I think he's a Democrat, Jeffrey.
It's a hell of a long game if he is.
Yeah. Somebody said, how else would you destroy a party except from the inside? You know what I mean?
That's true. That's
Because
true.
he used to be a Democrat. He used to be an independent. He used to be a communist. And now,
Now it's whatever the fuck he is.
he can't grab Jello. Anything I should watch tonight? Any good shows?
Oh shit! What should you watch?
Hmm.
Hmm. Oh no.
Okay.
I really haven't watched anything recently, so
That's why I love you. The latest episode of Rick and Morty is coming out. tonight.
Ooh. I need
Ooh,
to sit down and watch some Rick and Morty. Such
yeah.
good
I
stuff.
mean,
It's so funny.
I really do enjoy the. There was a TikTok about the plumbus, right? And there,
Hmm.
I remember there was this commercial about this is the plumbus, and it was like a how the products are made type thing, one of those shows. And I listened because I can't see it, but I actually watched it, and it was this weird thing that it was like a penis, and it was like, and then the plumbus gets sucked out, and you're left with the, and this is rubbed on it, and I was like, I never saw that, I never got the genius of it until I saw it, you know.
Oh God, no, it's so funny. It's
But
so good.
you know what was weird?
Hmm.
I tried Jeffrey watching the new Space Jam on HBO Max.
Oof.
I hated it. But one of the weirdest things was just like a Rick and Morty appearance. They were just there and then they were gone. And I was like, please tell me that Rick and Morty aren't Disney. You know what I mean? Like I will stop watching if they are Disney now. You know what I mean? It's a bad movie. I mean,
Oh yikes.
I don't know basketball, right? And I don't know who LeBron James is besides his activism. He was angry for like the 45 minutes I watched the show. He was just mad at everybody. He was just a jerk to his kids. He was just like pushy to everybody. And then he got tossed into this cartoon universe and he was angry all over again. And I didn't want to watch like 2 hours of LeBron bitching because I didn't know who he was, you know? But other
Hmm.
people have said Space Jam is a great movie. I'm going to say I give it 0 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with the Michael Jordan Space Jam, and that was great.
Mm, mm,
It was weird as fuck, but it was
yeah.
great.
This one was like shoving 10 pounds of slapstick into a 3 pound bag.
Yeah,
And it
I've
just
heard a
wasn't
lot of
good.
complaints about it.
Mhm.
Sometimes you gotta leave a classic alone.
Yeah. I was trying to think of a classic they should bring back. And you know what I thought of? Highlander.
Hmm.
Why have they not remade Highlander yet?
I don't know. That was a pretty good one, but I'm not sure. What I am interested and excited in is a remake of Dead Space that is actually happening.
I don't know what Dead Space is. Tell me.
Dead Space was a video game that came out in 2008 that was a survival horror game uh, based in deep space mining ship.
Hmm. Okay.
And it is like I loved the original game. Like fucking put on headphones, closed door, lights off, scare the shit out of you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Although like it definitely is dated to to the console that it was released on.
Hmm.
My hope is that with the new one that they'll really engage the horror side of it more, because
Yeah.
Dead Space as a horror game was fantastic, but the later iterations of it as an action game really sucked. It was a horror game and it was supposed to be a horror game.
Yeah. Okay. I'll leave it there. Silent Hill was the one I played. It was
Hmm.
just freaky as fuck, you know what I mean?
I loved Silent Hill too.
Mhm. Well, I love you, Jeffrey. Thanks for being here.
Love you too. We'll catch you later.
Well, Debbie, I said hi.